Welcome to Breaking Wire. Please subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for more updates. President Trump's announcement of a sweeping 50% tariff on imported goods sent shockwaves through the global economy, causing immediate ripples across financial markets worldwide. Investors and analysts scrambled to assess the potential impact on international trade relations and economic stability. The administration framed it as a bold move to protect American industries and bring back manufacturing jobs, but the reality was far more complicated, with many questioning the feasibility of such a strategy in a deeply interconnected global market. The tariffs quickly became a tax on American businesses and consumers, disrupting the flow of critical raw materials, medicines, and affordable products. Prices soared, and supply chains were thrown into disarray, affecting everyday life. Economists and industry leaders warned of severe consequences, predicting job losses and inflation, but the administration insisted any short-term pain would be worth the long-term gain, promising a revitalized economy. Instead of fostering negotiation, the massive levy was seen as economic aggression, setting the stage for global confrontation. Allies and adversaries alike braced for a potential trade war. The policy, a high-stakes political gamble, underestimated the complexity of global supply chains, which had been meticulously developed over decades to optimize efficiency and cost. The fallout began almost immediately, hitting the very Americans it was meant to protect. Farmers, small business owners, and factory workers faced uncertainty as the economic landscape shifted dramatically. The healthcare system felt the impact first. Essential medicines, many of which rely on foreign ingredients and complex global supply chains, saw prices soar overnight. Pharmacies struggled to keep shelves stocked, and even common medications became harder to find, leaving patients and healthcare providers scrambling for alternatives. Pharmaceutical companies, facing mounting costs, passed these increases directly to patients. This forced many families to make impossible choices between their health and their financial stability, with some skipping doses or rationing prescriptions just to get by. The tech sector was equally battered. Tariffs disrupted intricate supply chains, driving up costs for everything from microchips to rare earth minerals, key components in everything from smartphones to life-saving medical devices. Production delays became routine, and innovation slowed. A Texas medical device firm, once poised for growth, was forced to halt expansion and lay off dozens of workers as costs spiked. This story was echoed across the industry, with small and large companies alike struggling to stay afloat. Patients like Maria Sanchez, a retiree living on a fixed income with a heart condition, saw her medication costs triple almost overnight. The sudden spike threatened her well-being and left her facing tough decisions about her care. The administration's call to buy American rang hollow for many, as it ignored the reality that the U.S. lacks the domestic infrastructure to produce many specialized components at scale. The transition would not be quick or easy. Building new supply chains and factories would take years, not months, leaving Americans to pay the price in the meantime. Everyday goods became more expensive, and shortages became a new normal. In the end, the tariffs became a crippling tax on both innovation and health, exposing a deep misunderstanding of how interconnected and fragile the modern economy truly is. The consequences rippled through every sector, leaving lasting scars. America's farmers were among the hardest hit by the escalating trade war, feeling the impact in every corner of their lives and livelihoods. As countries like China and Brazil retaliated with steep tariffs on U.S. agricultural exports, the global market shifted almost overnight, leaving American producers scrambling for buyers. Soybeans, pork, and corn, once in high demand, were suddenly shut out of key international markets, causing a massive backlog and halting production lines. With nowhere to sell their harvests, farmers watched as unsold crops rotted in the fields and commodity prices crashed to record lows, erasing years of hard work. A family farm in Iowa, once thriving and passed down through generations, now faced the grim reality of bankruptcy and foreclosure threatening a way of life. Farmers felt betrayed and abandoned, squeezed not only by lost markets, but also by rising costs for imported equipment, seeds, and fertilizer, making survival even harder. Government aid arrived, but it was too little, too late, unable to replace the stability and security that reliable export markets once provided for rural families. The tariffs, intended to protect American workers, instead devastated the heartland, leaving small towns and rural communities struggling to survive. Rural communities faced economic ruin, with the dream of revitalization turning into a nightmare as businesses closed and families moved away. The disconnect between political promises and the harsh economic reality became painfully clear, fueling frustration and distrust among those most affected. The backbone of America, its farmers and rural communities, was left to bear the brunt of a failed policy, their resilience tested like never before. Brazil responded to the tariffs with defiance, uniting behind President Lula da Silva's call for national sovereignty. Rather than capitulate, Brazil pivoted away from the US, accelerating trade deals with the European Union and deepening ties with China. New agreements secured stable markets for Brazilian exports, turning a crisis into an opportunity. This realignment signaled a shift toward a multipolar world, with Brazil actively reducing its reliance on the US. The tariffs intended to isolate Brazil instead strengthened its global position and China's influence in the region. The US lost strategic ground in its own hemisphere as economic coercion backfired. The episode revealed the limits of using tariffs as a tool of foreign policy. The Trump administration's threat to impose similar tariffs on the European Union sent a chill through transatlantic relations. Negotiations stalled, replaced by uncertainty and mistrust as both sides braced for a trade war. European leaders vowed to retaliate, targeting iconic American exports and raising the stakes. The prospect of a tit-for-tat trade war threatened to plunge the global economy into recession. American industries reliant on European components faced soaring costs and potential layoffs. The tariffs risked hurting the very sectors they were meant to protect, exposing the complexity of US-EU economic ties. The administration's zero-sum approach put thousands of American jobs and decades of partnership at risk. The escalating disputes with Brazil and the EU reflected a broader trend: the weaponization of economic policy. The 50% tariff destabilized the international trading system, eroding trust in US leadership. Nations began reducing their dependence on American markets and the dollar, strengthening regional trade blocs and alternative systems. Experts warned that trade wars have no winners, only disrupted supply chains, higher prices, and lost jobs. The interconnected world meant tariffs inflicted harm on both sides, acting as economic self-sabotage. True economic power comes from partnership and integration, not coercion. By wielding tariffs as weapons, the US risked isolating itself from its greatest strategic assets, alliances, and global influence. The long-term cost would be measured in lost trust and diminished leadership on the world stage. In the end, the 50% tariff policy proved a catastrophic miscalculation, a self-inflicted wound on the American economy. Instead of bringing jobs back, it triggered retaliation, devastated farmers, and raised costs for families and businesses. The tariffs acted as a regressive tax, fueling inflation and layoffs while eroding trust with allies. The policy revealed a profound disconnect between political rhetoric and economic reality. As the fallout continues, the administration faces mounting pressure from those bearing the brunt of its failed gamble. The episode is a sobering reminder: economic strength is built on bridges, not walls. Isolating America from the world only isolated Americans from prosperity and security.